In today's video, we have some notable players on NHL waivers. We'll discuss the possibilities of them being claimed. We also have an update on the Patrik Laine situation with him being benched, and we have some trade rumors concerning teams like the Canucks, the Senators, and the Pittsburgh Penguins with their new leadership. We'll jump into all the latest news coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, we have a variety of things to talk about here. I want to start off with NHL waivers. We have three players, all players with experience on the waiver wire today. Possibility that we could see one maybe get claimed, although a couple of these contracts are not all that favorable, so pretty good chance, I would say at least 2 out of 3 clear. So the players on waivers include Loui Eriksson of the Vancouver Canucks, Artem Anisimov of the Ottawa Senators, and Taylor Fedun of the Dallas Stars. Now, of course, in the case of Anisimov and Eriksson especially, unlikely they get claimed. I mean, Eriksson's the least likely given the fact that he still has another year on his contract. This is just something they have to go through. When players go through waivers, obviously they're allowed to be assigned to the taxi squad or to the minors, but depending on if they have NHL action, they can play 10 games or 30 days, whatever comes first, and then they need waivers again to be able to move between the roster here. So you're probably going to see a lot of waiver activity over the next few days because there's a lot of players that were on that massive amount of guys on waivers back almost a month ago that we saw right around the time the season was getting underway that will need waivers again because a lot of those players are not guys that are going to be sitting in one spot, going back and forth between the NHL roster and the taxi squad and the minors, depending on where the team needs them to be and whatnot for roster flexibility especially. So we'll see what happens. I know in the case of Ottawa, Anisimov is going to make some room to bring up another player off the taxi squad to give them a chance to play. Anisimov has been a healthy scratch for, I think it's about 7 games in a row now. I think maybe 8. They hasn't played him in a while. He's been on the taxi squad. I'm not sure if they'll actually put him down to the minors or not, but either way, it will allow them some flexibility there. So I'm more than likely he does get assigned just to give somebody else some playing time or an opportunity to be back on the taxi squad. In the case of Eriksson, he's not getting claimed because of contract, and with Fedun, it's difficult to say how things go. Now, another situation that came up last night, which is likely going to lead to more postponements. We saw the Vegas Golden Knights have players removed from their game late into the game here. We had, I believe it was Nosek and Theodore, if I'm not mistaken, were both taken out of the game for precautionary reasons. It's believed at this point. We don't have confirmation. We're waiting on the reports. By the time this hits YouTube, it could be confirmed that they had a positive test come back, or at least one, during game action, which I think is just going to put more pressure on the NHL here again to get more of this rapid testing involved, especially on game days. They can't be having this happening with players that are on the ice playing and they have COVID and they don't know it. I mean, that's just too risky to spread it and just going to make it worse and risk possibly, losing the season here. So we'll see how the league handles this and what kind of announcement they will make sometime, whether it be later today or tonight or sometime in the next 24 hours on the situation. And hopefully we can get more updates on what they're going to do to control this because they need to have more rapid testing. I think at this point is really the only solution. Now, of course, yesterday we talked about Patrik Laine and John Tortorella and Laine being benched for a big chunk of their last game. Now, we have further reports indicating what actually transpired. I know Tortorella, after the game, indicated that it was not about a specific play or blown assignment. We know Patrik Laine is a goal scorer, and if they're going to treat him and punish him for poor defensive play, that's not going to work because that's just not what he is. But at the end of the day here, he does have a little bit of a reputation. If you look back, especially prior to being drafted, prior to being in the NHL, there were some concerns over him being difficult to coach or being uncoachable, or choose whatever word you want to call it. The reports indicate now is that he had a situation with an assistant coach where he either kind of blew them off or mouthed off at them or something to that effect, either on the bench or in between periods. I'm not sure what it was, but once Tortorella got wind of it, he stopped playing them for the rest of the game. So that's the reports right now. Laine did make comments on it today after practice, kind of owning the situation, and he didn't really go into it. He said he was going to stay inside the Columbus dressing room, but he did say sometimes you say things you shouldn't or don't mean. I can't remember exactly what his quote was, but basically, with a roundabout way indicating that it was something related to that. So we'll see how the relationship between Laine and Tortorella goes moving forward here. But obviously that's not a good start to him with the relationship with the coaching staff. And we'll know more about his future with the team soon enough because he's a pending RFA. And at season's end, we'll see if he signs a longer-term deal to stick with them in the future. Now, as I mentioned as well, we have some trade talk concerning a few teams. I want to kick things off with Vancouver. Now, the Canucks are a team that continues to struggle here, and many feel that this upcoming week and the next probably 4 to 5 games are the utmost importance and will kind of dictate the potential, at least the shorter-term future of this club and what we see happen. I mean, there's some people saying Jim Benning should be fired. Some people are saying Travis Green should be on the hot seat. Other people are saying they need to make some trades and address some shortfalls with the roster. And, I don't know what we're going to see in Vancouver, but I know that there's a lot of people that are upset and disappointed with their performance so far, and they're certainly not following up last season's bubble playoffs with what they were hoping for in this 2021 season here. So clearly the moves that were made in the offseason, or lack thereof, I guess we could say, with the players they've lost, have had a major impact on this team, which we suspected. The defense has not been strong. They're missing some guys back there. Obviously, Tanev left and Stetcher left. So they're doing well in their new homes. I mean, they may not have been the absolute top best defenseman, but they were a good fit there. Of course, between the pipes, that hasn't been as strong as what Markstrom's given Calgary and what he gave Vancouver the last number of years. So up front's not too bad, but they are missing Tyler Toffoli. And, many feel that a lot of that rides in the GM for not having enough wiggle room with his cap usage to be able to bring these guys back. And they basically made a lot of them wait, and they just couldn't wait anymore. They found contracts elsewhere and had to take them for their own security to make sure they got what they needed. So we'll see. But a couple of players that are been mentioned here, we talked a little bit about yesterday, was Jake Virtanen as well as Adam Gaudette. Some updates on those situations from Elliot Friedman's 31 Thoughts blog that came out today indicates that Jake Virtanen is getting interest from a variety of teams. He did mention the Bruins as well as the Penguins and a few others. So we could see something there. And with Adam Gaudette, he mentioned the Nashville Predators have been poking around, maybe interested in Gaudette's services. And a player he also mentioned from Nashville, not necessarily linked to Vancouver, but when it comes to the Predators that he talked about that has kind of ran into some issues and might be available would be Nick Cousins. Things haven't really worked out the best for him with the Preds this season, and he's wondering if they might be making him available, would consider making a trade as well. So, the Predators are a team who could be in talks with the Canucks around the services of Gaudette, and Virtanen, obviously very well gets a fresh start somewhere. It's just a matter of where, really, with numerous teams. But like I said, Boston's been the team mentioned the most, but I'm just not sure exactly what they would offer Vancouver for Virtanen. It might be something more futures-based. Hard to say. I'm just not sure that there's a lot on Boston's roster they're really going to want to subtract or probably going to want to add. Those guys are certainly out there as being available. Like I said, we're going to likely see something a little bit more, at least minor, possibly a little more drastic in the next week or so if the Canucks struggles continue to go on here as frustration continues to mount. Now, when it comes to the Sens, of course, Friedman mentions in his blog again about Derek Stepan being a prime candidate. They're trying to move to get him closer to home, back to his family who are still in Arizona. So they're working on that. But we had talked about before about the Senators maybe moving out a defenseman because they have a crowded area there, especially with Erik Brannstrom now being able to play. Now, he did get hurt, but he's only going to be out short term, probably about a week. So when Brandstrom's ready to play more full time here, I mean, he had a few good games. And Artem Zub, who's coming off the taxi squad back 4 or 5 games ago, looked really solid. So some of those veteran guys are kind of, again, getting bumped out like we've seen with Anisimov going on waivers today amongst the forwards. Braden Coburn was put through waivers and he cleared, so he's sitting right now on the sidelines. Josh Brown hasn't played in a little while, so I'm not sure what their long-term feeling is on Brown, but he mentions Mike Riley as being the defenseman that most likely they attempt to trade. I would still think they would probably prefer Coburn to go, but that's going to be difficult to do. Riley at least has some value. Not the strongest defensively, but if you want somebody who can play third pair minutes, is a good skater, and can maybe be on power play 2 for your team, then Riley's not he's a decent option. He's a fairly cheap contract, and he's not, he's still relatively young. He's only in his late 20s. So really overall, Riley might be a guy we see moved from the Senators here as well, as they continue to find more opportunities for the youth and move out some of these veteran guys that just are not cutting it. Their defense in Ottawa has played much better the last 2 or 3 games. They've kind of found more of a solid 6-man rotation there that kind of fits and has been doing a lot stronger. So, like I said, Coburn hasn't been playing. Brown hasn't been playing. Brandstrom's out now due to injury, but they got Wolanin back, and Riley could be the odd man out once Wolanin and Brandstrom are both healthy and ready to play full time here. So we'll see what the Sens do, but I do expect some activity in the very near future. Now, of course, the other big talk here is, what are the Penguins going to do now that they have their new management team intact? Of course, we announced yesterday the hiring of Ron Hextall as GM and Brian Burke, is a surprise guy, as president of hockey operations. Now, of course, they also did a quick interview with Brian Burke on the 31 Thoughts podcast, kind of getting all the details here about how everything came together. And Brian Burke wasn't really even in the mix, but he was in contact with CEO David Morehouse, as he knows a lot of the guys he was interviewing for the GM job, and it's kind of being used as a bit of a sounding board, getting opinions on these guys and ideas and that kind of thing. And then once Mario Lemieux found out that Brian Burke was kind of helping him out with a lot of details and conversations, he said, well, why don't we consider him to come in as well with Hextall? Because they seem like they zeroed in on Hextall pretty quick. So he said in the interview, it came together really quick. It's not something he was expecting, but it was just a job he could not refuse to turn down, because he has a lot of respect for how the Penguins have had so much success here in the last really a decade plus, ever since the Crosby era has been in town. Now, as far as what they're going to do, essentially, it looks like they're going to try their best to stay in win-now mode. So I do expect Hextall and Burke to organize some trades, address some of the team's deficiencies, and see if they can get them into the playoffs and see what they can do in the playoffs. And then from there, they'll have to make some hard decisions in the offseason. Do they continue to go with win-now mode? Or if things don't go well, he did say they may have to look at maybe taking the team in a different direction, and they're certainly prepared to do that. But ownership certainly wants one more kick at the can here before they seriously go down that road of, maybe even considering a Malkin or a Letang maybe leaving town. Both guys don't have a lot of term left in their contract. Next year would be their final year. If they were going to do a trade for a big player on the Pens, this coming offseason would be a prime time, because there's not a lot of contract to take on if you're going to be the acquiring team there. So we could see a drastic shift in that, and they could be responsible for moving out some of these top veteran guys if things don't go well. But they're going to try to avoid that and try to bring in some help for those guys to see what they can do here in the short term. Now, I would suspect a couple of things we're going to see from the Penguins. What's been rumored out there is they're going to really address the goaltending situation. I'm not sure how they feel yet about Jerry and DeSmith, but you have to think there's concerns there from the new management team. And on defense, they may wait, because they've had so many injuries. They might want to wait a little while before they address the blue line, because they want to see what they have when everybody's healthy. And that's half the battle right now. So they could maybe bring in some blue line help. But, the guys they've brought up, like Joseph, for example, has been great. So we will see what they do in that regard. And in the forward group, hard to say what they do, because, obviously there's limitations here. But Burke and Hextall are fully expected to make some trades. Burke himself said on the 31 Thoughts podcast with Elliot Friedman that they definitely will be making moves and trying their best to get this team ready for another kick at the can here for the current season. So I guess let the speculation begin on what moves we're going to see for the Pittsburgh Penguins and their new management team here. They're not going to be moving out any of their big time players here just yet, but if things go horribly wrong, it could be a very unpredictable and active offseason with Pittsburgh maybe taking a drastic step for a new direction for the future. So let me know what your thoughts are. What moves are we going to see from Hextall and Burke to get this team one more shot at a championship in the short term? Let me know your thoughts down below, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content, and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.